G'day and welcome. It's another session of Any News Australia where we focus on topics concerning business, law and the economy and trying to get the information to the people that need it most by having interesting guests on our show. And today we've got someone extremely interesting, SJ from Contrast Media, who's putting together a documentary called At What Cost? And I'm going to hand it over. Just SJ, tell everyone a bit more about the documentary that you're creating, at what cost, and what it's all about, what you're setting out to achieve.
Anthony, I'd just like to acknowledge you for allowing me to come onto your show. I also just like to acknowledge that the land that I stand on is Gadigal land, and I'd like to acknowledge my past and my present ancestors that I walk on this land for. This land hasn't been decreed or it hasn't been acknowledged, so I just like to acknowledge all my ancestors and all my further Aboriginal elders and anyone out there who is Aboriginal descent and Torres Strait Islander descent. So for me, Anthony, this documentary is about what is going on in the last 2 years in relation to lockdowns and businesses going under, and also about mental health. Predominantly, my background comes from photojournalism. I was at Al Jazeera and a Hong Kong Free Press photojournalist for a number of years. And when I came back from my last assignment was based in Hong Kong. And when my last assignment ended, it was ended on the premise that we had to come back because there was something that was actually going to happen. We didn't know what it was. And this was in the middle of Poly University's riots. I don't know if you saw those riots that were happening in Hong Kong. And when they went from using live rounds to, from rubber bullets, to live rounds, and we knew that there was something really not right with what was going on in Hong Kong. So when I came back to Australia, I was virtually unemployed. I had no job prospects because I hadn't worked on mainland Australia for a number of years. So for me, I wanted to start up an independent production house, and realizing that 85% of Australian media was 85% was Anglo-based. And for me, it was to bring in, I guess, non-English speaking, but people who had English as a second language into the mainstream media. I knew fundamentally serving in, doing stuff in countries like the Middle East, that something wasn't right. But I'd done that because I wanted to get paid, and just ignoring what was actually going on in those particular areas. And especially Hong Kong really drove home to me what was actually happening with the world in general. So when I came back to Australia, that was the first lockdown. So I'd done my first 14 days in lockdown, actually, coming back from Hong Kong, sitting in the hotel room, not thinking or not understanding what was actually going on. Just doing a bit of homework and that, and realizing that this didn't add up. We were told 1 + 1 = 2, but then all of a sudden we were told 1 + 1 = 5. So for me, I thought, suffering from PTSD and also, attempting suicide a couple of times, I thought we needed to talk about why we weren't talking about the suicide rates, but we were talking about the COVID rates. I just wanted to bring that into the conversation. I wanted to bring that into the arena to go for people to ask the question, okay, COVID might be out there, but why aren't we talking about suicide rates? And especially around, First Nations people, and also around men in businesses that were starting to ramp up. So off I went on this journey to look at investigating it. And I asked to get commissioned by Viceland. They put in a couple of dollars into the project. But then when the narrative started to change, it was more or less pulled to the fact as, we'll give you the cash, but, we don't know if we want to be talking about, what I commonly call the crocodiles in the sewer. And then they started to appear. So for me, I couldn't ignore these particular stories in relation to businesses going to the wall, mothers having kids actually commit suicide. That was pretty heart-wrenching. So I then had to tell this story. So where we are now, 3 months into production, we've got a number of stories now from small businesses that were doing really, really well, but now will never, ever come out of, COVID. They'll never survive this particular situation because the government in the first lockdown supported them. the second lockdown, they were there failing to support these businesses. So then I want to point that out to businesses as well too, or to point that out to mums and dads that were actually suffering. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do At What Cost.
Yeah, can I just jump in for a second? So, just for those at home that might not be following along, you mentioned we were told 1 + 1 = 2, and then 1 + 1 = 5. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Okay, so I guess if we take it back to our school days and we go, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, so we know that maths works. But then all of a sudden, then we hear from our teachers that now 1 + 1 = 5. But we know innately in ourselves as humans, from our intuitive instincts or also from our teachings, that 1 + 1 can't equal 5. It has to equal 2. So I want people to understand or ask the questions of why all of a sudden that we can go to the football, but we can't sing in church. This is the type of conversation I want people to ask. And the other thing on that, Anthony, is that I want people to also ask, why last lockdown did I get this particular, support, but this lockdown I'm not getting the support? And also, too, why are we talking about the numbers in COVID, but we're not talking about suicides? We're not talking about in 2019, on the same year I think we're in August in 2019 when we're through a drought. And predominantly the drought happened out in regional New South Wales. There were 85 people who took their lives. But in that same correlating month, there were 120 people who took their lives in metropolitan Sydney when lockdown was happening. So this is the type
I wasn't aware of those statistics.
Yeah, so these are the types of questions I want people to be really asked. I'm not saying that we're against government narrative or anything like that, but I just want people to ask questions to their politicians in relation to why these numbers just don't add up and why these stories that they're telling people out there that they don't add up. And we've been in front of a number of people now, Anthony. We've been in a number of people. Last week we were down in Finley, down in the border of Victoria, speaking to an ambulance officer who done 31 years in the service. But now all of a sudden, because he's asking, is this vaccine safe or is this procedure safe? And they're saying, yes, it's safe. Now he's asking them, can you actually prove to me that this is safe? And when they say, we can't give you this particular data, he says, well, until you give me this data, I can't really be on board what you're telling me to do. Now, for 34 years, you would think that this guy would have a number of runs on the board. But
absolutely,
his employer now is saying, well, you got to do it, otherwise you're going to lose your job. So where does these 34 years come into play here? These are the questions I want people to ask, Anthony.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'm really interested about your time overseas. You mentioned Al Jazeera and your time in Hong Kong. I mean, that must have been quite an interesting period of your work life to be amongst all of that. What's the word I'm looking for? Chaos?
Oh no, total chaos. If I my previous I've had a pretty extravagant, well, not extravagant, like a big life in relation to these particular events, and that as a photojournalist. For me, if I bring up Hong Kong, it was just a bit funny that these students, if you understand the story from Hong Kong, that the Chinese government, anyone that committed any particular crimes, were taken off mainland or taken off Hong Kong and taken to mainland China to be tried. And this is when these students actually went, this is not cricket, so to speak. And from there, I was at that Million Man March at Poly University, in between the students, in between, I guess, law enforcement, and seeing from one day when they were using, tear gas to then using rubber bullets, then to using live rounds. That was a bit concerning for me. And then now I can actually relate this back to now what is actually going on in Australia. For me, I live in the inner west, and seeing actually water cannons on the streets, I thought I'd never see that particular moment, is whereby I saw these particular events happen when I was in places like Hong Kong, in in Afghanistan and also in Iraq, I would never have thought I would have seen this in this country. Never thought I'd see this. You know, I mean, people aren't seeing these particular types of things and not correlating these things, Anthony.
Yeah,
You would
I guess the mainstream media isn't really showing them very much.
No, that's correct, and I wish, and I hope, you know, I really, really, truly hope that people can actually identify that this is actually happening in our own backyard right now, Anthony. This is actually happening in our backyard. And you'll see a clip that we're going to play soon for this particular police officer that we interviewed, who again served 34 years within the police force, Roland. And I mean, I was traveling. I live in the inner city, and my studio's in Sydney. And the second protest that was happening in Sydney on Parramatta, and I was going back to my studio or coming back from my studio, and on Parramatta Road, there would have been no word of a lie. There would have been close to nearly 80 police officers pulling people over, and they were actually taking people out of buses and taking them off the buses and questioning them because they weren't wearing masks. This is where we're at, Anthony. And I saw this, and I turned my car around. I had my cameras in my car, and I went into virtually photojournalism, which I really don't want to be doing this job anymore, mate. I'm really over it. You know, I wanted to come back home and have a quiet life, you know, and spend time with my kids.
Yeah, no worries. Look, that video you mentioned about the police officer, we'll play that one at the end. But maybe if you want to cut through to another video you want to share with everyone, give everyone a taste.
Yeah, I'll share this video that we actually just finished today with a particular gentleman, Brady Croft. People might know Brady and that. Who set up this organization called Stand in the Park. Again, it was about like, you know, just peaceful process, a bit like Gandhi, what Gandhi done, Anthony.
Yeah.
So let me just share my screen if I can.
Hopefully this works.
Hopefully this will go down well.
Fingers
can you share my screen, brother?
Not yet. Oh, here we go. I'll add it in.
Is that clear?
Yeah, we're looking at your desktop now. Yep.
Yep. Okay. All right. So let me just go. Sorry a moment, guys. I really apologize for this.
Do you want to queue it up, and I'll put it on the screen once you got it queued up?
Yep. Give me 2 seconds and. Okay, here it is here. Can you see that, mate?
Here we go. Yep.
All right. Did you want me to play that now?
Yeah, play. Yeah, give it a play.
Okay, so guys, this is the very first look at Brady's first look. We're up virtually up at Port Macquarie and up at the Tweed Heads over the last couple of days. So yeah, please enjoy.
One of my favourite sayings is what you think is your nemesis is actually your superpower. And so when you take 100% personal responsibility for something and then start standing on that foundation, all of the worst things that have ever happened to me are some of the best things that ever happened to me. Because I would never have found these parts of myself if it wasn't for that. Why would you stand up from in front of your flat screen on your comfy lounge and walk out the front and make life hard for yourself? You just wouldn't. It's just not in human nature. Yourself in adversity, and they're the best parts of yourself. I just came up with this sort of idea that it would be a stand rather than a protest, and we'd stand for nothing. Therefore, we couldn't be it wouldn't be dividing or divided. It wouldn't segregate anyone. We'd be standing for our personal truth, and all of our personal truths are different, but we all stand together for each other's freedom. And it just sort of came to me. I think I had a few wines, and I just said, I'm going to do this, because it was a big thing. I said, I'm going to make a stand in the park. We're starting this thing. It's going to be every Sunday in Hyde Park in Sydney. Come down. I'm standing here for me. This is my line in the sand. I'm using my energetic intention. Who cares? I mean, and I think that's probably what sort of gave birth to Stand in the Park was that lack of agenda or whatever. I didn't start it so that everyone would come and joined me and we'd start this worldwide thing, even though that was kind of the plan, but it wasn't about that. I wasn't looking anywhere above I was just sort of making my own stand. I mean, every Sunday there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people standing in parks. All over the world. There's 30 countries, there's about 1,300 of them, and they're really taking action, and it's really mobilising, and that's the peace and freedom that I think a lot of people look for in the external, but it's all inside of ourselves, but it's the last place we look because it fucking hurts so much. That's what's happening in the world right now is exactly that. Peace and freedom. Peace and freedom.
Trying to unlearn.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. That's pretty well done.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we're doing our best here. Yeah, we really want to get the message out to our fellow citizens in relation to just get them thinking, Anthony. Just really get them thinking. You know, I'm not in relation to, you know, I just want people to have the opportunity to have freedom of choice, freedom of movement, freedom of association, just freedom of everything. I'm a very proud, you know, Yorta man. You know, and for me, you know, my mum was a good lady. She's passed now, but she virtually told me to continue this conversation and get people to understand it. So you'll see with the other trailer that we actually got towards the end of the clip is Uncle Max Harrison, who holds the narration up through the whole entire journey in relation to permission, Anthony. It's all about asking for permission, no matter black, white, brindle, pink, purple, whatever. You know, we're not left or right. We're just about having human rights, man. And this is how I want the story to be told. This is how I want the legacy to be left. I saw last week that you had some really great guests like the Qantas airline pilot and the young police officer as well too. You know, I'm just a director, mate. These guys are the ones that are putting themselves out there. You know, I'm just the one that wants to tell the narration and tell the story, mate. This is the conduit that I want to be.
Yeah. How difficult has it been for you, sort of putting some of this together so far?
It's pretty hard. It's pretty. It's been really difficult when you have stories of mums, and I think who are telling you that their kids are committing suicide, Anthony, because they go in the playgrounds and they're told that they can't be played with because they're not vaccinated. That's hard. And was in Finley last week down in Victoria, a young boy, Toby, with his dad, who's actually an AMBO as well too, a number of years, who goes, "Dad, this is just not right." And then for my daughter as well too, to turn around and go, "Dad, all I want to do is just play football. I don't want people to be fighting with each other anymore."
I think we all feel a bit like that.
I just don't want people to be fighting with each other anymore, Anthony. I just want to tell the story and let people make their own decision. I thought I'd never see this in this country.
I'll give you a second to get your thoughts. It's clear. Yeah, you know, you're hearing some of the real stories from the real people, and see how passionate you are behind getting this information out. Besides making people think and sort of think twice about some of the actions that they might be taking, what do you hope is the ultimate sort of outcome for, you know, Australia, I guess, the society? What happens to this movie, to this documentary afterwards?
Good question. I just want people to realize that they have the ability to speak up, mate. Contrast media was for people. When I set contrast media up, was for people to have a voice. It's for the people who don't have a voice, because people right now think that they don't have a voice. Anthony, we're run by mainstream. I mean, coming from that industry, you have a voice, Anthony. And I'm hoping, as myself and my team, which I'm very, very fucking passionate about and love dearly, that we can present this particular story. We're not about right, wrong. We're just about storytelling and about telling us that why is 1 + 1 not equal to 2 anymore? That's all we're about, mate. We're not about anything more. And the kids, man, the kids have to see this story. They have to see the story.
What type of resistance? I mean, are you getting resistance from putting some of this together? Whether it's political resistance or resistance from people?
I was very, very clear in the fact that I have to tell human stories, mate. And the human stories are the ones that are affecting small business owners, fathers, mums, and dads. And that's where it kicks in. It's not about being vaxxed or unvaxxed or whatever it is, because all of a sudden we see the divide that is happening. We see the medical apartheid. We see the division that is happening. We see the division on Facebook. We see the division everywhere else. Me personally, it is just about saying, please just stop and ask the question. I'm not saying you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. But when you are not allowed to go into a cafe because of your status of either vaccination or your color, your creed, or anything like that, Anthony, then you've got to stop and go, there is something wrong about this. Why should your vaccination status matter if you go into a cafe? Why should your vaccination status matter if you go into a theatre? How have we got to this position? I'm not saying it's right or I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want people to stop and think and see the correlation between my father was South African, Indian, my mother was Koori. My dad used to say stories that he couldn't go to particular fountains, mate, and drink from these fountains. This is what this is like now.
Yeah. I've had some guests on the show and people that I talk to too that point out some very interesting things. It seems like in the last, maybe 20 years in particular, we made such progress with regards to discrimination, racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, religious discrimination, all types of things like that. And it all came undone so swiftly, apparently. And it's very difficult. Some people are saying to watch. Yeah.
We talk about First Nations rights. We talk about all these gay rights. We talk about all these particular types of rights. And if I go back to the conversation I had with this particular gentleman down in Finley on the border of Victoria, his daughter goes to a boarding school in Victoria, and she put on there "My Body, My Choice" sticker onto her dormitory door like she does boarding school. And her boarding supervisor or teacher said that you need to take that off your bedroom door. But upstairs, there was a gay rights flag that was proudly presented on her dormitory door.
Wow.
So, I'm now all of a sudden, as you've seen, these other trailers that were dropped. I've solely held Uncle Max Harrison as one of the key narrators through this documentary. And I placed up one of the trailers, a couple of months when we first dropped it. And these people that you will think that were on the side of, Black Lives Matter or whatever like that, present these conversations. Sorry. And then all of a sudden, then when when Max is out there presenting this conversation, these people that you think that were on, you know, First Nations issues, post on to these feeds and saying that you guys are knuckle draggers.
Yeah, wow.
This is
Okay.
really, there's a big division here, mate.
Yeah, hopefully your message will come out to the people that need to hear it. For the people listening or the people who watch it after we've recorded this and want to help out, what types of things can they do?
Well, we have a GoFundMe link right now. We initially had some funding from other networks like streaming service like Vice and stuff like that, but that's dried up because the narration's changed a little bit now. So we've set up a GoFundMe page, and we're just about 2 weeks left or short of shooting, and then we'll go into what we call as post-production. And there's the post-production side of it that really, I mean, the pre-production and all the shooting and that costs a lot of money, so we've burnt through a lot of cash there. So far, we've probably burnt through close to nearly $60,000. So for us to get this out there now, we're looking for another $50,000 to get this completed. And we're looking at other streaming services to get this onto. We've spoken to a couple of streamers right now, but we've had interest from places like Tropfest and Sydney Film is to see it. But we've also had other interest from independent, you know, theaters up on the North Coast who want to show it as well too. I'm not here to be a Steven Spielberg. I'm here just to tell the story, mate. We're not making any particular money from it. I've just got to pay my crew. I'm going to make sure my crew gets looked after and get this story out there. So we've got a GoFundMe page out there right now. So anyone that's listening or watching, you know, I guess Anthony will share the GoFundMe page, and it would be of massive help if we can reach this target to get this particular documentary to the world.
Yeah, I've just dropped that GoFundMe link into the chat, so you'll find it in the comments on YouTube and on Facebook. And look, I guess anyone that's viewing now, or if you're viewing it after we've recorded it, not live, then, you know, if there's someone that's been affected by COVID in an adverse way, you know, some of the stories that you've heard Sean talk about already, if you know someone in that situation, maybe share this with them too. Let them know that, you know, Contrast Media and Sean are trying to be that voice for them. And if there's people that you sympathize with or empathize with, then please do your best to contribute what you can to get this documentary made. And maybe on that, we might share that last clip and end it, unless there's something else you want to share with people. Sean?
Man, I just want to acknowledge you, mate, for all the work that you're doing, Anthony, and I really appreciate you allowing me to come and speak to your audience. You know, I think what you're doing is very courageous. So, you know, from my heart, man, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to get this message out there. Thank you.
No problem. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure having you on the show and meeting you. And I look forward to meeting all your crew one day soon as well. And look forward to really see this documentary be made and get out there and have the impact you're hoping for it to have.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you.
All right, before we end, thank you everyone for watching live today. Thank you all for watching it after we've recorded. Thank you for all the volunteers that helped me put this together, to my team. Thanks for all your comments and shares and subscribes. They help us keep doing the good work. And thanks again, Sean, for joining us today. And we're going to end with Roland, is it?
Thank you so much, brother.
Great. See you all next time.
I ask you, my Blue family, my New South Wales and my Australian police colleagues, in fact, police globally, we're all the same. We joined to look after our communities. So I ask you to stand down from violent confrontation. Hold a space for people to protest peacefully. You have discretion. The office of constable is one that you have original authority. No member of Parliament, no senior officer can direct you to take action against a member of the public. What action you take is based on your original authority. And when we look at things like the use of force, don't forget you're trained in tactical disengagement. We can't carry forward the mindset that we must win at any cost. Sometimes that cost is too great. You cannot pin someone to the ground or throw them against a wall because they're not wearing a mask. This is the tactics that we use on the worst of the worst that are out to destroy the public, that are engaged in the most heinous crimes. Let's not treat our fellow members of society who are engaged in peaceful protest, let's not treat them in this way. So you have original authority. So when you're directed to go and take enforcement against members of the public who are peacefully protesting for their basic human rights, their basic survival, and yes, there will always be members in these groups who will infiltrate and look for chaos, look for violence and attack police. And violence is unacceptable. It'll only be met with violence. But wherever possible, we need to facilitate a safe space for our members of the public who are protesting these basic loss of human rights. Don't forget, what you enforce upon them, you're enforcing upon yourself. It's your community in which you live. Your kids go to the same school. You go to the same shops. So the lie you enforce today is the life we live tomorrow.